Good morning children and welcome back to your English online class. I hope your day has started well. So let's begin our class today. We are going to do a poem, The Walrus and the Carpenter. I hope you know what is a walrus. A walrus is a mammal. It's a marine mammal which is found in the North Arctic region. So, The Walrus and the Carpenter is a special kind of poem. This is a poem of which you might not have heard before. It is in a nonsense verse. Now, what do you mean by a nonsense verse? A nonsense verse is a type of verse in which descriptive imagination is used and words which make no sense at all are used. It often makes use of characters which appear to be quite whimsical and fancy, and words are used that usually have no meaning. So this is the explanation for a nonsense verse. Now let us read the poem and find out more about it. So let us read the first, second and third stanza together. The sun was shining on the sea, shining with all his might. He did his very best to make the billows smooth and bright. And this was odd because it was the middle of the night. The moon was shining sulkily because she thought the sun had got no business to be there. After the day was done, "It's very rude of him," she said, "to come and spoil the fun." The sea was wet as wet could be. The sands were dry as dry. You could not see a cloud because no cloud was in the sky. No birds were flying overhead. There were no birds to fly. Okay, so when we read the first, second and third stanzas, we understand that the setting of all these actions is actually at midnight. Now, when the poem starts, it says that the sun is shining very brightly. But does the sun shine brightly at night? No. And what is the sun doing? It's shining brightly on the billows. What do you mean by billows? Billows is nothing but sea waves. It is an old usage of sea waves. So it's falling. The sun rays are falling on the sea waves and the sea waves are shining very brightly. And who is seeing all this? The moon is noticing all this. And it is sulking. Sulking means it's complaining or it is saying something very sadly. It is sad and it is complaining. And what is the complaint of the moon? The moon is complaining and saying that what is the sun doing here now? Okay, it's not the time for the sun to be here because it is midnight. So he doesn't have to be here. Why can't he go away from here? And it is very rude that he is out at this time of the night. All the more the moon is complaining because she says that I might have fun at night, but because the sun is here, I am not able to do anything. Then in the third stanza, we see that it is explained that the sea is wet, okay, the sand is dry and there are no birds in the sky. So we understand what is the atmosphere in that place through these three stanzas. The walrus and the carpenter were walking close at hand. They wept like anything to see such quantities of sand. If this were only cleared away, they said, it would be grand. "Oh, oysters, come and walk with us," the walrus did beseech. "A pleasant walk, a pleasant talk, along the briny beach. We cannot do with more than 4 to give a hand to each." The eldest oyster looked at him, but never a word he said. The eldest oyster winked his eye and shook his heavy head, meaning to say he did not choose to leave the oyster bed. Now in the fourth stanza, we can see that the special characters of this poem are entering. They are making their very grand entry. And who are the characters? The characters are the walrus and the carpenter. Okay, so they make their entry in the fourth stanza and then what do we see? We see that they are walking hand in hand on the beach. And as they are walking on the beach, they are having some conversations. So when they walk, they say that, oh, there is such a lot of sand on the beach, okay, and it makes them feel very sad. What is the reason for their sadness again? The reason for their sadness is because there is so much of sand on the beach. And they say that if the sand is cleared away, if so much sand is moved away from there, then it will be so good to see. Then as they were walking, the walrus notices something. What does the walrus notice? He notices a colony of oysters, means a group of oysters. And then what does he do? He invites them. You come and walk along with us. So the walrus invites the oysters to come and walk with them. Then he says that if you come and walk with us, what can we do? We can have a pleasant walk. We can have a very good walk. Not only that, we can also talk to each other. So that is the two lines. We can have a pleasant walk. We can have a pleasant talk. So the walrus invites the oysters for a nice walk, and they can also talk, he says. Then, but after that we see that the walrus says, we cannot take everybody. We can take only 4 oysters with us. Why does he say that they can take only 4 oysters? Because they are 2 people and they can hold only 2 people's hands. So 4 oysters only should come with us for a walk. Then there is the leader of the oysters, or the eldest oyster. He is not very happy when he hears this, and he winks his eye. Winks his eye means he closes one eye, and that shows that he is not ready to come with them or to go with them for a walk. And he just shakes his head. He shakes his head, he winks his eye, and he shakes his head to show that he is not ready to go for a walk with the walrus and the carpenter. Before we proceed to the next paragraphs, let me ask you a few questions. The first question is, what is unusual in the first stanza? Okay, you have to tell me, what do you find strange or different in the first stanza? And then in the next stanzas, that means in stanza 4, 5 and 6, it is explained that the walrus and the carpenter were upset. They are upset that there is such a lot of sand on the beach. Do you think that is a normal reaction? Don't you feel that there is something abnormal about it? Whatever you feel, you can tell me about it. And then we see that the eldest oyster rejects, or he refuses to join the walrus and the carpenter for a walk. Why do you think he refuses to join the walrus and the carpenter for a walk? So these are some of the questions that you have to give me answers for. And let us move to paragraph 7 and 8. Out 4 young oysters hurried up, all eager for the treat. Their coats were brushed and their faces washed. Their shoes were clean and neat. And this was odd because, you know, they hadn't any feet. 4 other oysters followed them, and yet another 4. And thick and fast they came at last, and more and more and more, all hopping through the frothy waves and scrambling to the shore. In the 7th stanza, we see that who is disobeying the eldest oyster? 4 young oysters are disobeying the eldest oyster, and they are going behind the walrus and the carpenter. And then the poet describes the appearance of the 4 young oysters. What is the speciality about their appearance? Yes, they are dressed very neatly, their hair is combed very neatly, and they are wearing well polished shoes. But that itself is very strange. Why is it strange? Because oysters don't have feet at all. So why are they wearing shoes? Okay, then what do the 4 oysters do? They follow the walrus and the carpenter, and they start walking behind them. But then we see that someone else is following the 4 oysters. Another 4 young oysters are following them, and this number continues. 4 oysters continuously follow each other until it becomes a very big group of oysters which follow the walrus and the carpenter. Now today we are going to stop with these 8 stanzas because as you can see, it's a very long poem. So what we will do is we will do the second part in the next class, but you have to wait to find out what happens to these oysters, and that you will get to know in the next class. Until that, read the lesson very well. Read the poem very well and try to understand the poem. Mark the difficult words. Write the meanings in your notebook. So that's all for today's class. Thank you and have a nice day.